So what income does a guy need to have in order to have a wife that stays at home?
So that is the trade-off, right? Is like women, we provide youth, beauty, and fertility and submissiveness in exchange for resources. Because one thing you learn when you have babies is that when you're pregnant and when you are postpartum and when you are nursing, you are no longer a strong, independent woman. You need resources. You can't, like, if you got a baby attached to your boob for 16 out of every 24 hours, it's really tough to go to work. Can you do it? Can you bring a pump and be in the break room pumping milk and freezing it so that the nanny can feed the baby? Yes, you can. I hated it. I tried doing that when my oldest kids were little, and it was a nightmare. I remember sitting there trying to pump milk and just crying because I was exhausted. It was horrible. So you do want a man with resources if this is what you want to do. It doesn't mean he has to make a ton, but it depends where you're going to be. So if you are like in the rural Midwest or the South or in the suburbs where it's more affordable, you can probably have a good family wage of like 45, 50,000 a year.
Wow.
And you'll be okay. Yeah. As long as you are okay with maybe having either just one car or, you know, one car that you have that's your main car and you have a payment. And then the other car is a cash car that's like a spare for going around and getting groceries or things like that. It's not your main car, but it's like a backup vehicle. Mm-hmm. So if you're cool with making all those sacrifices and lifestyle changes that I was talking about, 40, 50K, you can totally do it. That's about what we made for years when the kids were all little.
That was my question. How many
more than that now, but
right. How many kids could you do 40, 50?
We did it with 5. It was tight.
Wow.
It was tight, but we did it. And our neighbors had 11 kids. And I want to say that their dad made probably around 70, 75.
Wow.
Yeah, they were a Catholic family and they kind of did the same thing as us. And yeah, they had 11. So,
and that's in the suburbs or
we're like rural Midwest, one of the cheapest areas probably.
What, do you mind what state are you in? If you
Michigan.
Oh, you're in Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. So if you're in corn country, and your husband can find either like a good factory job, a good job in agriculture, that's the good thing about being out here is that cost of living is low, but men's jobs, like higher paying men's jobs, there's quite a few. There's quite a few around here. If you're in urban areas, it's going to be stuff like tech and you're going to be in the city and everything's going to cost more. There probably are ways to do it. But I don't know if you could do it with 5. So you know what I mean? Like if you're in New York City and you're trying to find housing for a family of 7, that's going to be tough.
Right.
That's going to be tough to do.
So what if you're in a big city? What does he have to make?
That totally, like I looked at some of that data and it really depends because the most expensive cities were Washington, D.C., New York, L.A., and Chicago. And the things that cost the most in those areas are daycare and housing. Those are like the 2 most expensive factors. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you'd probably have to make double that. You'd probably have to make like 80 grand, wow, I would guess.
Wow, 80. But I would wonder, could you like move out? Because I'm from Chicago. So I'm thinking like he could commute like an hour and a half to work. It wouldn't be ideal. But if you wanted to go back on housing, couldn't you do that? Like hour and a half.
You totally could. And now another thing that has changed in a big way since 2020, and the thing that happened in 2020 is that they're estimating that 25% of all jobs in North America will be remote work by 2030. So in just 7 years, a quarter of all jobs are going to be remote work. So that does give people a lot of other options. So now something you could do is maybe your husband works remotely and you guys can live in a less expensive area, or maybe mom can do part-time work from home to help supplement while the husband works outside of the home. So there's like multiple other ways you could make it work because of remote work now that we didn't have. And it kind of goes along with having all the different homeschooling options because of technology too, because we have other ways to connect and find resources now with the internet versus maybe 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so can you break down the budget of if you, let's say you're 21, you want to have 5 kids, okay? Mm-hmm. And you've met a guy that makes $40,000 a year in the country. How do you break down the budget?
So there's another thing to think about when we're talking about the budget is that the first kid is the most expensive. And then after
My mom said that too.
Yeah. Each subsequent kid is less expensive because you're already kind of set up for it. So when you have your first baby, you're going to want a house with at least 2 bedrooms probably. So that when the baby gets 2 or 3 years old and they're out of their crib and you want them in their own bed, they've got a bedroom and you and your husband can have your privacy back. So let's say you find like a manufactured home that's 2 bedrooms, 2 baths out in the country. It's $150,000, right? And you maybe have a mortgage that's like $900 a month. Mm-hmm. And then food for the 3 of you isn't going to be too bad, but the initial investment is going to be stuff like you need a high chair, you need a car seat, you need a stroller, you need a baby bed or a crib for them. You're going to need to buy their first outfits and all of those things. Now, when you get to baby number 2, a couple of years later, that baby can now use the oldest one's high chair and car seat and stroller and wear a lot of their clothes. Some of the clothes are going to get yucky, you'll throw them out, but a lot of them can be reused by the other kids because they grow out of them so fast. I remember my kids having outfits that they wore once and grew out of it. You know what I mean? So I had a lot of clothes that I could still use for subsequent kids. Let's say you've got your main car that you have a loan on that you have to pay every month, and that's your husband's commute car. And then you just buy a cash second car. Maybe you're paying a total of, I think the average cost for a car, according to the data I have here, is $1,600 a year for the commute back and forth to work. Mm-hmm. $133 a month if you do it cheap. If you want a nicer car, it's going to cost more. But so you've got that, and then you've got your utilities. You probably need to make, $4,000 a month, let's say. Okay. So if your husband can bring home $1,000 a week, you'll be fine. As long as you're willing to be somewhat frugal and, get your purse from Target instead of from Balenciaga or whatever, then you'll be fine. And the second baby is less expensive and the third baby is even less expensive. And I always say 3 is the hardest. And then after that, it actually gets easier.
My mom said the same thing.
Yeah,
my mom said she's like,
I know who have a bunch of kids. They're always like, yes, 3 is like the hardest. It's like the sticking point. And then 4, 5, 6 or whatever, it gets a little bit easier. Because at least for mine, when the older ones were like, my oldest was 11 when my youngest was born. And at that point, like when I brought the littlest one home from the hospital, she was like, I want to hold her. I want to feed her. I want to she knew how to burp the baby. So I'd be like, I have to pee, hold the baby. And I could run and, use the bathroom or do something I had to do. And I could reliably count on her to hold her for a minute. It's not like I'm dumping the entire care of the infant on the lap of the 11-year-old. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they actually like to help and they want to help, or they can do more chores and stuff. I think that's another important thing. I always had my kids do chores. And according to their age, whatever they could do, that's what I had them do. So when they're like 2 or 3 years old, they can put away their toys. They can, put their dishes in the sink when they're done eating, things like that. When they get a little bit older, they can wipe down the kitchen table. They can put out the plates and the silverware when we're going to eat dinner. And then as they get older, they can do more. And you actually want to teach them to do that. And my oldest one has told me multiple times now, she's like, when I was little, I always thought it sucked because my friends never really even had chores because they had parents that worked all the time and they were kind of raised by their tablet and their TV and didn't really have to do chores or anything like that. And my daughter would always be like, why am I out here stacking firewood when I'm 13 or whatever? She's like, why do I have to do this? But now she's like, I am so thankful that my parents taught me how to take care of myself and how to work, because now I'm 22 and working circles around everybody around me. And all my friends are really entitled and don't know how to do anything. So I think having kids do their chores, having them pitch in and help is great. So if you want 5, yeah, you're going to have to make more. But the good thing is your husband's income will probably grow as your family grows.
Can you have kids my mom told me, I don't know if this is true or not, that you can't have kids there has to be when you're breastfeeding, you can't get pregnant. Is that true?
Yeah, usually when you're lactating, you don't ovulate. That's not 100%. So don't think of it as birth control per se, because you still can get pregnant, but it's much harder. It's like you usually won't ovulate if you're lactating full time. So that's why my great grandmother probably had 30 periods through her whole life, because she had her first baby when she was like 22, and she had 4, and she nursed each one all the way till they were like 2. So she'd nurse until they were 2, and then probably sometime in the next year she'd get pregnant again. So she'd be pregnant for 9 months, and then she would nurse. So it'd be like 3-4 years of no periods for her with each kid, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of health benefits to that for women. It's protective against different cancers. And it's like, if you're lactating and you're nursing all the time, you're probably not going to get pregnant until the baby is starting to wean. So that's kind of a benefit. Less hormonal birth control.
They said that's why siblings are no less than 10 months apart instead of 9. How long do you breastfeed for? I don't even know.
Mine like 18 months to 2 years.
Wow.
But it gets less. Yeah, it gets less as they get older. So I nursed them full time until they were about 1. But by the time they're 1, they're eating a lot of solid food too. So they would maybe only nurse like right before nap and right before bed.
So when can you get pregnant again if you have a kid? Like, how old would the first kid typically be?
Usually like 1.5, 2 years old, somewhere in there.
So they're usually
it's a little different for everybody, but I was somebody that all I had to do was sit next to my husband and I would be pregnant. So for me, it was like pretty quick. But it varies a little bit, but yeah, like 1.5, 2 years probably before you have to worry too much about it. Although everybody knows the story of somebody who got pregnant like 2 months after they had a baby. It can happen.
Okay, interesting. No, because my mom said that's something people don't think about. Is like, you can't have kids back to back to back. You have to wait.
Yeah, it usually, if you're getting pregnant again right away, it's because you're bottle feeding. And there's some people who do have to do that for whatever reason, anatomically or other reasons there might be that nursing didn't get established and maybe they're bottle feeding. Then they can get pregnant again right away.
Yeah. Wow. So 40 to 50,000 a year. Wow. I can't believe you can raise 4 or 5 kids on that. That is not the message that is pushed. That's not like a stupid amount of money. Like, that's really attainable.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, if you know a little bit about the history of population control propaganda, you'll know why this is the case. It started with Thomas Malthus in like the 1700s, and then his ideas got reinvigorated at the beginning of the 20th century by all the women's lib activists. They wanted women in the workforce. They did not want them in the home. And part of that was because this is right after the first industrial revolution, where these giant factory owning, like Gilded Age wealthy people wanted a bigger labor pool with lower wages. And they figured out, if you tell women, hey, you can be independent and have your own money, and then you don't have to depend on a man, and like he could be abusive, and they would fearmonger women to death about not being able to trust men, push them into the workforce, pay them crap. And then it also lowers the men's wages, because now you've got this giant labor pool, right? If you've got a bunch of female factory workers coming in, well, they can, on an assembly line, they can do a lot of the same things women can do. And so those men's wages would get driven down. And so it's great for the wealthier upper class. And then on top of it, you get to double your tax base, because now it's not just the husband's wages being taxed, it's the woman's wages being taxed as well. And that's another thing you should think about when you're deciding if mom should go to work, because there's not every situation, but a lot of situations, you're actually going to pay more in taxes if the woman is working.